Okay, I'm down.
The appeal before the U.S. Supreme Court, I'm a lawyer, and it had to do with the fact that I was targeted with the nation's first private corporate prosecution, which led to almost 3 years of detention. This began in the summer of 2019 after I'd helped indigenous peoples win a $10 billion, historic pollution judgment against Chevron in the Amazon of Ecuador. And that case has been affirmed on appeal by 6 appellate courts. So Chevron, Texaco, which is now Chevron, Texaco went into Ecuador's Amazon in the 1960s, built hundreds of oil wells, and over roughly a 25-year period, deliberately dumped as part of its engineering design billions of gallons of cancer-causing toxic waste onto indigenous ancestral lands, into waterways that indigenous groups and non-indigenous farmer communities were relying on for their drinking water, for their bathing, and their fishing. They essentially took an area that had been pristine, an ecosystem that had been pristine for millennia, and wrecked it in 10 years. And the end result down in Ecuador is that hundreds, thousands of people have gotten sick. Many have gotten cancer and died. Chevron lost the legal case in the court of its choosing down in Ecuador. They wanted it there. They accepted jurisdiction. And instead of paying the judgment, they went after me here in the United States in a civil case in New York, trying to knock me out of the case. And that, led to a series of legal maneuvers where they demanded my computer. I appealed an order where they, it was unprecedented, unheard of for a lawyer to have to turn over his confidential case file to opposing counsel. And while I appealed that order from a pro-Chevron judge, the judge charged me with criminal contempt of court for not obeying an order I was appealing to a higher court. That led to my almost 3 years of detention on a misdemeanor contempt charge, completely unfounded charge. It was rejected by the U.S. attorney for prosecution. It was filed by this judge, Judge Kaplan. And ultimately, after the case was rejected for prosecution, Judge Kaplan appointed a private Chevron lawyer to prosecute me in the name of the U.S. government. That's why I was locked up. And he also appointed a judge, a colleague of his, a good friend of his, Loretta Preska, who's a big leader of the Federalist Society. And there was what I believe was a collusive effort by Chevron, its lawyers, these 2 judges, and this Chevron prosecutor to basically silence my advocacy by detaining me on false charges. And, this just ended about a year ago. Meantime, I appealed this whole.
And you went to jail.
And I went to jail 45 days in Danbury, and I was,
prison, I should say, right?
Prison, yeah. Federal prison.
And she also, one more thing, I just have to add this because I think it just shows you what type of person we're dealing with or system. But Preska said that you needed a 2x4 between the eyes when she was delivering your sentence.
Yeah. Yeah. She's
proverbial. She did call it the proverbial 2x4.
Proverbial 2x4, as if I'm the one violating the rule of law. I mean, the whole thing they did targeting me was a violation of the rule of law. In any event, I appealed this to the U.S. Supreme Court ultimately, and the court today, or I should say yesterday, turned down my appeal. They didn't actually consider the appeal. We filed a petition for certiorari. They wouldn't take the appeal. They take very few appeals. Sure. My appeal got a lot of traction because there were several very prominent lawyers, I would say an all-star team of lawyers from the left, the right, the middle, who backed me because what they did was so offensive to the rule of law. It really was beyond politics. It turns out that 2 justices, conservative justices, Gorsuch and Kavanaugh of all people, wrote a dissent of the decision to not accept my appeal. And it was, I thought, beautifully written, completely supportive of me, and basically said the whole case is unconstitutional and illegal. And as Gorsuch said, the Constitution does not tolerate what happened here. Yeah. But what was shocking to me, first, I was appreciative of the fact that dissent was written. Right. What was really shocking to me is that none of the other justices joined them. I mean, all you need is 4 justices for a case to be accepted on appeal. I'll point out that none of the 3 liberal justices, Sotomayor, Kagan, and Jackson, stepped up for me, or, forget me, stepped up for the rule of law, because it's so outrageous. And then the other conservatives, Sam Alito and Clarence Thomas and Amy Coney Barrett also didn't join them. So I find it kind of surprising that only two really supported the idea that this private corporate prosecution should be overturned. Now,
and that they were the conservatives. That's the weird thing, or maybe not the weird thing.
I mean, look, you might disagree with their principles and their philosophy, and I do, but they are, I think, principled when they believe in something. They will go after it. And we've seen this in a negative way, in my opinion, in many cases over the last 2 years. I think the liberal justices are much more transactional and I'll also say this, people talk about a liberal conservative split on the Supreme Court, 6 conservatives, 3 liberals. I mean, those are just labels. I mean, what really happens is on social issues, there is a split. On economic policy issues, on corporate issues, there usually isn't.
Right.
They're all walk in lockstep.
Yeah.
So, anyway, bottom line, Katie, is that private corporate prosecutions, as a result of this refusal to take my appeal, are now essentially legalized in the United States. I mean, I'm the only one. We're raising resources to fight this. We don't want this to happen to me again. It could, or anyone else. We look at what's happening in Atlanta with 42 people charged with domestic terrorism, most peaceful protesters of the Cop City Police Academy. We are seeing an increasingly aggressive corporate police judiciary assault on advocacy, I should say progressive advocacy in this country. And it's frightening. And my case is a key component of that. And, it could happen again. And we need to be aware of this case. We need to be aware of the battle that is ongoing to make sure it doesn't happen again. And of course, the larger battle to make sure Chevron pays the judgment in Ecuador. It's using this case to try to avoid paying the people, the indigenous peoples in the Amazon that it poisoned, which really prompted this whole assault on me, resulting in my detention and resulting in this, really, I would say, disastrous abandonment of the rule of law by our own Supreme Court and allowing a corporation to act in the name of, they didn't just prosecute me, but they acted in the name of the United States government. I mean, you had a Chevron lawyer on a legal brief saying, it was like Rita Glavin, United States of America, like she was a real prosecutor. My detention, by the way, even if I had done something wrong, and I don't believe I did, in any event, I was appealing it. I wasn't thumbing my nose at the court. I was acting as a responsible lawyer. And, they locked me up. No lawyer charged with my contempt charge had ever been locked up pre-trial in the history of our country. I spent over 2 years and 2 months on a misdemeanor with a maximum sentence of 6 months. I spent over 4 times that amount prior to my trial, locked up at home with an ankle bracelet. And then Judge Preska still gave me the maximum 6-month sentence. And I ended up, almost 3 years in detention on a charge where the maximum sentence is 6 months. It was a pure oil industry driven political retaliation against a successful environmental lawyer, justice lawyer, and human rights advocate. By the way, I have a family, I have a wife and a son who's now 16. And this didn't just hurt me, it hurt my family,
of course,
hurt my son, hurt everyone who cared about me and cared about the people of Ecuador.
Right.
And deprived my clients of one of their main advocates for a number of years. I wasn't able to travel. Still can't travel, by the way. They won't return my passport. But look, the larger issue is, our Supreme Court is duty bound. It's our highest court. Their mission is to protect the rule of law. And what we're finding more and more with this decision and others is the court is actually not doing its duty. It's not protecting the rule of law, and it is abandoning the rule of law for purposes of expediency, politics, corporate power, influence, whatever the reason. I mean, I'll point out that I'm litigating against Chevron now for 28 years.
And they haven't paid a penny to the people of Ecuador.
But they've been donating roughly $200,000 a year to the Supreme Court Foundation, which very few people know even exists. There's a foundation that raises millions of dollars a year for the ostensible purpose of preserving the history of the court and promoting the rule of law. How ironic. And so Chevron their general counsel is going to all these gala dinners once a year with the justices. The people of Ecuador don't get that opportunity. It's inappropriate. That foundation, by the way, should be shut down. But why do I have a case against Chevron before the Supreme Court, and Chevron's donating money to the Supreme Court Foundation, and Chevron's top lawyer sits on the board of trustees of the Supreme Court Foundation? It's all wrong at a deep level. And look, I respect the rule of law. I actually believe there are a lot of good judges in this country. There's a lot of space in the court system in this country to do good, to at least try to achieve justice with fair judges. But increasingly, we're running into problems because there's so many right-wing activists, ideologically driven judges now in the federal judiciary, several of whom are on the Supreme Court right now, that it is very, very difficult to use courts to achieve justice, to carry out, the aspirations of justice that so many millions of Americans have. So, my case needs to be pushed. By the way, we're going to international fora. I've got a team of international lawyers ready to help. And we're not giving up just because the U.S. is not in alignment with international law and the rule of law. We are going to try to hold our courts and our government accountable for what has happened here.
Anything you want to say to these liberal judges?
It's just disappointing. I mean, you can't work your whole life, and this is a lesson not just for judges, I think, but for everybody in institutions trying to get ahead. And then when you finally get there, you just abandon what you fought all your life to do. Why would you get to this highest level where no one's going to get rid of you? Become a truth teller. Like, really do your job. Uphold the law regardless of the powers and influences that are being put upon you. So I just find, look, I get people have different judicial philosophies, but I don't see differences with the idea that a judge-driven private corporate prosecution by the very company that lost the civil judgment in Ecuador against the lawyer who won the judgment, locking him up. I don't see how there can be an argument about that. That's not consistent with the rule of law. So I'm disappointed in the liberals, and I hope they do a better job going forward. But the larger point is we're not giving up. We're going to keep fighting and wherever we can in other courts to hold this government accountable for its violations of human rights and the rule of law as regards lawyers on this case fighting Chevron for justice in the Amazon. Sorry, by the way, for that light back there.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the light of justice.
Yeah, I know. I was thinking you look very angelic. Yeah. Can Merrick Garland do anything?
Of course, Merrick Garland could do something. I mean, as you know, because you helped so much, Katie, when I was detained, but we had asked Merrick Garland for a number of months to intervene and block this weird animal, this private prosecution, and he wouldn't. And, when we appealed to the Supreme Court, we were hoping the DOJ, his agency, would write a brief supporting us. They didn't. They supported Chevron and Judge Kaplan. So I'm disappointed in Merrick Garland. I would say the same thing to him that I just said about the 3 liberal Supreme Court justices is like, why work so hard your whole life to get to that position and not really, implement the law and the rule of law without fear or favor? And what that means is you got to help vulnerable people. I'm an individual. I'm not even in a law firm. Okay.
And you've been disbarred.
And I've been disbarred. I worked for years out of my apartment. My clients are even, they're far more vulnerable than me.
Yeah.
I mean, they have no money and very little support. The indigenous peoples of the Amazon who are being poisoned by Chevron's pollution.
And they wanted you to hand over your communications with them, which would have put them at risk.
It would have put their lives at risk. And I'll say, we can't have a system, okay, where there's sort of one rule of law for the wealthy and powerful and a different one for the vulnerable and the marginalized. And that's what I'm seeing over and over again in this case and others. And it takes courage. It shouldn't, but it does take some measure of courage by Merrick Garland, by judges, not just at the Supreme Court level, at other levels, to really adhere to the law. without fear or favor and apply it equally. There should be equal justice under the law. And obviously I've been singled out and targeted, and the Supreme Court didn't help me. By the way, I still want to just mention again, I appreciate Justices Gorsuch and Kavanaugh for taking a principled position.
Yeah.
I really do. I want to recognize that. Okay, we're not going to just throw out the whole court on every issue
Sure.
here.
And who thought it would be them? But yeah,
They did good.
they did the right thing
in this one instance, but it's really disappointing that the other
Yeah.
7 did not. I actually thought they were going to take the case and that they were going to rule in my favor 9-0. I don't know what the argument is.
Yeah, what was their argument?
I don't know because
because they didn't they didn't take
when
it.
they deny a case, they don't really write about
Right.
it unless there's a dissent, and the dissent supported me. I don't know. They take very few cases. Maybe they just didn't think this was a good vehicle because I'm an unpopular person in those circles.
Yeah, they don't want to piss off the
and judges
Supreme Court
like
foundation.
Yeah, and they like to protect each other. Maybe they want to protect Judge Kaplan. I mean, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, because Preska was a Bush appointee, right? But Kaplan is a Clinton appointee.
That's exactly right. They're both of the same philosophy.
Right.
And also remember that I mean, this is pure speculation. It's probably just ridiculous to mention. But, Justice Sotomayor worked in the same building with Judge Kaplan for many years. She comes out of the Second Circuit Court of Appeals in New York. And you feel it when you're in the New York courthouse. I mean, the judges just take care of each other.
Yeah.
And that might have had something to do with it.
Right. You think that there's some I mean, I guess it is. It's because people are corrupt and power hungry, but you think that maybe there'd be some professional courtesy or solidarity with you as a former lawyer. I mean, I guess they're just accepting the smeared version of you, but you'd think that maybe they would get that this is not something that should be done to lawyers.
You would, wouldn't you? But, there's been one thing I've noticed with how I've been treated by the bar. It's dominated by the corporate firms. The corporate firms make their money representing wealth and power and corporations. And they hate it when upstart lawyers who don't, especially ones who had, I come out of the privileged part of the profession. I graduated from Harvard Law School, and they really hate it. They just hate it so much to see someone with that background fighting for justice for the marginalized. I mean, and not only fighting, but doing it successfully. It drove them crazy. And they just felt very psychologically terrifying, I think, to them.
Yeah.
And I always felt this targeting of me was coming from a weird, obviously there was a political purpose to destroy me and destroy the case, but it was also there was this weird kind of emotional, psychological element in their lawyers where they just really were after me.
Yeah.
As was Judge Kaplan. I mean, there was just gratuitous attacks on me, and they have been for years. I'm still under attack. I mean, they pay Google $1 million a year to just put propaganda out about how I'm a criminal.
Right. So that comes up first in your search.
Yeah, exactly. So, it's ongoing again, which is why, we're still fighting and need support. But yeah, it's an intense existence. It's complicated, but luckily I have a ton of support from independent journalists like you, from my family, from the 68 Nobel laureates, 120 NGOs, there's some 10 members of Congress have written letters. So it's not like I'm alone, but it is
David and Goliath
targeting me, and it's something I deal with pretty much every day.
Anything you want to say about East Palestine?
Sure. Are you able to see me with that crazy light?
Yeah, it's a little, I mean.
Should I move to?
Yeah, can you move a little bit?
Yeah.
Steven, and I feel like one time that we were doing this, my friend's kids came in the room.
Oh yeah.
That was really fun. I was talking to you and Roger Waters, and my friend's adorable kid came on. Yeah. So we've always had.
Okay. Is that better?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I'll say this about East Palestine. What a tragedy. It was not an accident. Okay. That was the result of deliberate decisions by Norfolk Southern Rail to not invest in braking systems, technology, sensors on the tracks that would have prevented the accident. It is a case, I consider it a corporate crime. And if I were a prosecutor, I would open an investigation because I think there are potential criminal charges against company executives for what happened. I know we're not going to talk about it in too much detail today, but I just want to point out, if you take my bizarre private corporate prosecution and detention, and then you throw in the Cop City issue, where 42 protesters have been charged with terrorism, face 35-year sentences. And then on top of that, you throw in the Ohio train derailment, where I actually believe hundreds, if not thousands of people over the years are going to become afflicted with diseases, including cancer, and face the possibility of premature death. You put all those things together, what do you have in common? You basically have corporations running roughshod over the people, with government not doing its job of protecting the average person. And I would say, I'm an old dude now. I've been doing this a long time. I'm 61. The thing I've noticed the most over the trajectory of my career is the increasing deepening of corporate influence over our governmental structures and institutions, and it's not just the president, it's all three branches of government. It's penetrated the judiciary. And you are seeing increasingly bold manifestations of corporate power expressed through judges, the police, and other government organs in a way I did not see in the 1970s and 1980s and even the 1990s. I mean, it was always there, but it's really in full bloom right now. And I think we need to understand how to connect the dots between these various phenomena to understand the framework of what's really going on in this country. It's not fun to watch, and it's scary, but we can deal with it. We just have to see it for what it is and organize to deal with it.
Well, thank you. Let's do a show where we do that.
Love to do that. And we get a couple of other people who know more about, but it's but thank you, Katie, for all you do.
Thank you, of course. Yeah, thank you. And keep up the good fight. And we'll put a link to your website in the YouTube description.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Stephen.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, guys, remember, we're doing a call-in after this. And if you watch this live, you're so in luck. If you're watching this later, to see the full John Pilger interview, which is amazing, I got to say, go to patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. Also, that's not Stephen's house, by the way. People are commenting on Stephen's house. It's not his house. But, yeah. Anyway, I think that's all I have to say, except thank you so much for coming to this show. It was a great one. Wow. Jam-packed. Thank you for people for the super chats. Love talking to Stephen Donziger. So brave. Love talking to Susan Kong, and love talking to John Pilger, of course. And if everyone who liked this, it's really nice that people are saying how much they liked it. And I would love for you to give a thumbs up and also subscribe. Those are free ways to support the show. You just subscribe, you hit the subscribe and then the bell, and you also can just give it a thumbs up. That's so easy. We got some really great, oh, that's so nice. Lana Michi, love this chat community. Yeah, we got some really great clips that came out. So make sure you tune in every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Every Tuesday at 7 p.m. we do the show, so you'll never miss it. Turn on your notifications. And I think that's it. We'll see you next week. And patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. Subscribe, become YouTube members. And thank you, Bradley Bloom from behind the screen. Thank you. And also thank you, Phantom Fanta, for the live clipping. Okay, I'll see you all next week.